Who are the creator beings carrying around seed bags that have been carved all around the world? Did they literally seed different civilizations throughout human history? Why did the Maya file their teeth down into points, flatten their heads, and have other bizarre beauty standards? Were they modeling something they were actually seeing? Between John's remote viewing data about other planets in ancient history, my investigative research into the Olmecs and art, and a side conversation about modern explorations and propaganda, there's a lot to uncover. So join John Vivanco and me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, for a show that's out of this world. Hey, John, how you doing?
Yeah, doing good. How are you?
Good. I like when a conversation starts with that kind of spirit right there.
Gusto.
We've got a pretty interesting episode for you guys today. We're going to be talking about, oh gosh, strange anomalies of Mesoamerica, and this is probably going to go on for a while because there's just so many. Kind of have to start at this one piece of artwork called Monument 19. Is it's considered an Olmec relief, a piece of art. You're seeing a figure who is sort of bent over in some type of what people think is a contraption. There is a serpent around and above him. Could it be a serpent mechanism that he's in? We don't know. But the most interesting part of this isn't even the serpent or the fact that this dude looks like Quetzalcoatl. It is the seed bag that he's holding, which we seem to find in so many different foundational cultures.
That guy's wearing a helmet. It looks like he's wearing a
He
helmet too.
is some type of helmet or something. And now, of course, the Maya and the Mesoamericans of that time were known for these types of headdresses. But what if it wasn't a headdress? I mean, we don't know, right?
Well, that's the other thing too is that there have been mummies found with elongated skulls. I mean, there
Yes.
is this sort of focus on the head, influence from potentially somewhere else.
We actually have records of contraptions that they were using to elongate human being
Right.
skulls of that time. It was considered beautiful. Particularly the Mayan standard of beauty was really kind of bizarre. Like, I mean, from our standards, of course, right? Like they pierced their teeth with jewels. They found huge noses attractive, which is why you see huge noses in the Maya artwork. And if a woman was born and she had like a cute nose, they would wear prosthetic noses actually. But the elongated skull thing, when you hit that, to me, I'm like, well, where did you get that idea? No human being is going to come up with an idea to elongate their skull on their own, especially if they're a hunter gatherer. Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to just be like, oh, you know what? Let's put this contraption together and elongate our skulls. Like, that's not going to happen,
Right,
you know?
right. I mean, we looked at some of the cases of elongated skulls and mummies coming from that area. They were not fakes, as far as we saw with remote viewing, and they were actually people who were being influenced by something else in order to elongate their skulls. Like they had this idea about being something from a higher realm. So basically, the data was talking about the influence of aliens and them wanting to look like them, and it was more of like this royalty thing. It was like if you had an elongated skull, you were part of this royal clan
Y-
that could call itself the ones that can rule over things here because they were basically given that power by higher beings. Aliens was talking about that in the data.
This is what's so interesting is some of the cultures around here and their beauty standards, like we were just talking about, right? One of their standards of beauty was that they would, when a baby was really young, they would dangle something in front of their face long enough for the baby to become cross-eyed because one of their deities was allegedly cross-eyed, where do you get the idea that your deity is cross-eyed unless you saw a dude who said he was a deity and you were trying to replicate what you saw previously? Like same thing with the elongated skulls, right?
Right, and you've got the elongated skulls on in Egyptian iconography too, which when we remote viewed that, it was the same thing as when we remote viewed what the Central Americans were doing back. So it was like the same thing, same sort of genre of remote viewing data was coming forward. So it's like, you get to this place where back then there was a broader civilization than anybody even realizes that was being influenced by something else. So you can take these elements from every single culture and go, gosh, these are the same elements and they're so crazy and so unique. And then you can remote view them and you find, whoa, they have the same source.
So now you have multiple cultures experiencing the same thing or very similar things. And then you get, of course, from that, these what people call wild theories coming up that there was something or someone going around and seeding these cultures, which is
Right.
what, guys like Graham Hancock and some others have kind of postulated on, you know, like how could there be a correlation like this that's this similar unless there was that going on? But there are particularly bizarre beauty standards in the Mayan or Mesoamerican culture because it wasn't just like this, the cross eyed sort of thing. They also sharpened their teeth. They thought sharp teeth with jewels on them was beautiful. So you can imagine like somebody smiling and you're seeing like just basically their entire teeth are made of fangs. What looks like fangs because they were filing them down. Like, where did you get that? Was that more animal? Like, were you observing animals and that's where it came from?
Right.
Maybe. But then how is your culture as honestly civilized as it was unless you were seeing this from something else from a much earlier time, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah, I don't know about the teeth. I don't know about the teeth. Like when you go down the rabbit hole into conspiracy, alien stuff, people often correlate those beings that have the bags, the seed bags, as Anunnaki, right? Some people say that they were reptile type. When you get into the lore around this, people out there will say, they think they know, or all of this stuff is down a deep rabbit hole. Nothing can be proven. It's literally just like a ton of speculation around it, which speculation upon speculation. Perhaps that's true. I don't know. I've never seen that with remote viewing data, but I mean, you could make like if you stay in that conspiracy rabbit hole, you could just say, well, yeah, they were probably reptilians with long heads and sharp teeth, and they all wanted to be like them. I don't know. I'm trying to find
Right.
an explanation here, man. We're not
Yeah.
going to win in court with this, so we might as well just go off the deep end.
No, for sure. But it's fun to speculate, right?
Right.
For sure. These seed bags, as John was saying, have been found in multiple different pieces of early art where, it's not just the Mayan, it's, you've got it in the Maya culture where Quetzalcoatl is holding the seed bag, Viracocha holding the seed bag, Anunnaki or Sumerian, what you and I have in previous episodes determined was the same race that went to visit Qin Shi Huang in China, the Wanchu citizens. They had the same, what we found to be technology, where there is this thing that looks like a pine cone or something like that, or a piece of maize or corn or whatever. And this thing could light up a river for miles just by
Right.
throwing it in there. Yeah, this is the episode right here, Emperors, Aliens, and an Impossible Sword. Definitely check this episode out that John and I have done before if you haven't seen it yet. That's a whopper. Is it possible that after the Younger Dryas, they start coming up from caves that people were living in? Humankind was, by all accounts, lost in what they were doing, and there were some beings that came to help seed civilization.
When we look at the seed bags okay, we're calling them seed bags, right? Because we've remote viewed like what's the representation of this in the low relief? Because this is how we see it, right? Low relief cut form. The seed bags always, and we've talked about it before, always refer to the reason why they have that is because they're the carriers of genetic information and they seed planets, they seed culture, they create people, they create beings. They've got all of it as seeds in their bag, right? In whatever form. And they're a highly sophisticated off-planet type of an entity that exists in more of the three-dimensional realm, because there's different like aspects to every single being and how they evolve. Beings can evolve outside of the 3D physical realm and move into a higher place, higher dimensional realm, higher vibrational, even lower vibrational. So these beings were responsible for the reseeding, like what you were talking about, after the Younger Dryas of planet Earth, according to our remote viewing data, which also falls in line with what other people have speculated. And the bag that is related to Quetzalcoatl would be considered the same general, not race, but group of beings who were seeding. And there was more than one. People will call that Anunnaki, which comes from the Mesopotamian times and represented in those low reliefs.
On Ancient Aliens, they bring these guys up every episode nearly,
Yeah, I
and they
mean, why
say
not?
that it
Yeah.
was
It's like,
they
so,
who came from the sky with a little bit of
right.
bigger hair.
So those guys weren't necessarily like a race that came from somewhere. It's more like they're a group from all over the place. They're not just like, oh, those guys live over on that planet over there or something. No, it's not like that. It's more like they are a group of different types of beings who come in and do this kind of stuff. And they'll do it when there are like great cataclysms, big cataclysms, like what you're talking about around the Younger Dryas. So the Younger Dryas was around 12,000 years ago, where all of a sudden the Earth temperature just over the course of 100 or so years just completely changed, violently changed, which is unheard of. I mean, that does not happen unless there's some sort of cosmic event that occurred.
It's no, it's kind of interesting though. Why would they all have the same iconography? Like, how is that? They must
Well,
be
that's
from
the
the same
thing.
group, like you were saying, right?
Right. Well, it's so funny how we're taught to think about this planet and how culture developed on this planet. We're taught to think in terms of these cultures developed within these closed walls, and then they opened up into other cultures. So every culture would have developed in totally different ways, all by themselves, without influence by other cultures, which is not it's not true, right? It's just not true. Now, if there's anybody talking about within the mainstream as to why there are bags, that why they have bags, and they're in Central America, they're in the Middle East, they're in China, they would probably relate it to being something like a collective consciousness, perhaps, where people are grabbing information or ideas from others in order to represent mythological situations. But that's not what we see. What we see is that it's totally different than what we've been told, in that there was more of an understanding. If you were a person living back then, at that time, you would have known about the civilizations in Egypt, in China, in the Americas. You would have known about that because there was an understanding that you are connected to, if not at times talking to, other beings that are coming from elsewhere, right? In fact, one of the things that we see when we look at other planets, and seems to be more of the norm in the universe, is that a planet, as they develop to a certain point, begin to come in contact with others from other realms and other planets, and it begins to form into this sort of open trade system of teaching things, of trading goods, where the people on the planet, beings on the planet, are interacting with them and they know all about it. And that's just normal. And that's just how things are. And so back then, it was a little bit more like that than it is now. In fact, now it's completely closed off mentally. Mentally, it's like, what are these UFOs, these so-called UAPs flying around, right? Well, those are part of those constructs, those beings, right? Those are part of that. It's just that we being clamped down so we don't think about it, we don't go towards it, we don't open up to it. That's actually normal. That's the way things are supposed to be.
So, why do you think, before we go on further, actually, I'm curious to know, why do you think we are closed off now if that was the way things were back in the day, right? So,
Yeah.
is it have something to do with the current civilization of humankind? Like at a certain point you stop interacting and you let humans either succeed or destroy themselves? Like what is the
Some people, a lot of people out there who are into this kind of stuff will talk about how there's this quarantine and that kind
Mm,
of stuff on Earth, from the perspective of outsiders. Like they want to quarantine Earth because of the low level toxicity that, or high level toxicity that happens here, mental, spiritual type stuff. The weird thing at the same time is that you have what you know, and what you know, if you do a ton of research, is correlation, total correlation between the powers that be holding the keys to off planet type craft, because we know they've been doing crash retrieval through grassroots research that a lot of people have done. We know that they have this technology. We also know that some of those beings are interacting with people in the government at a high level and kind of giving them the keys to the spaceship. To me, it seems more like not so much quarantine, more like we like those people that are messing around and controlling the rest of the sheep there because we can utilize that situation. And so we'll work with them, but we don't want those people to know about us. And I think, like, literally, it comes from the humans getting something out of it, whatever relationship that is, because we've seen that relationship many, many times, and the beginnings of that relationship with remote viewing. And I think that a lot of this has to do with an advantage over what people perceive as other enemies and the people in general. So I think that it's being shut down for that very reason. I don't think it has anything to do with people won't accept it, or they'll be scared, or et cetera. Or, there is an aspect that government can lose control if people knew that there was a higher power like that. But I don't think it has to do with that either. I literally think it has to do with keeping it from people so that they stay controlled.
the beings themselves want that, or the people here, like those in power want that, I guess you could say.
Like I say, I've never seen anything data wise that suggests that those beings want that. I've seen it more coming from our own Earth government. That's what I've seen it coming from. Now, I'm not saying that they don't want that. Look, we see it as being extremely diverse when we remote view it. Like, one being is totally different from another being, and it comes from a totally different place and it has totally different ideas about how things should go. And so it's not going to be like one shoe fits all for them, right? In general. But here on this planet, one shoe does.
Yeah, right. On this planet, one shoe does, right.
Yeah.
But I think people forget that too, is it's like if there are as many beings as there seem to be, in creation, all of them have a different personality and a totally different. Like, think about how different people on Earth are, even in one country, and how different and like wild the ideas can get just in even one community. And we think everyone just out there from a certain place all thinks the same.
Right. Now, I mean,
Probably.
like, here's the thing about human society and human, like, structures, cultural structures. Based on what we've seen and how humans were seeded here at a certain point in time, this idea that we have of how society goes and culture goes is a bureaucracy at a high bureaucratic level is actually a reflection of something that comes from somewhere else. It's what humans learn. Humans are the children of something else, and it's what humans learn by watching their parents.
Right.
And so what we have here structurally within society, governmental, is actually a reflection most likely of what goes on elsewhere, because we were seeded by something else.
Super interesting conversation. There's still a lot to talk about. How do you think, or do you think, after you know what we just said, that Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl were the same being?
That's a great image that Lindsay's pulling up right there. So that image shows up when we look at other planets. Now, I don't know who Quetzalcoatl is compared to like the Mesopotamian Sumerian reliefs. There could be like the same, it could be like a same representation over there as well as Quetzalcoatl. But what I think happened is that these beings would represent themselves in certain ways to how the people thought. Because see, you would have very different ways that the people appeared here physically, right? So in Central America, Central to South America, you would have people that were shorter with darker skin. And then you get over to Europe and people would be a little bit taller with whiter skin. Then you would get over to Asia, they would look different. Then you would get over to Middle East, they would look different. So you had these like sort of like sections where people look different. Now, when you get into the theory of evolution, which is a theory, it was about the idea that people evolved isolated, right? And so they developed these physical characteristics as as far as like how the environment like shaped them, right, over many thousands of years or whatever. But that's not what we've seen. It's not what we've seen with remote viewing. We've seen seeding. We've seen
Mm.
seeding of specific races, and that's those bags,
Yeah,
right?
and they're moving around and doing that.
Right. And they're moving around, right? So yeah, so that's what we've seen, not this thing where they evolved from, Muddy the Mud Skipper into like a Chinese person, you know?
Muddy the Mud Skipper.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah, a couple of strange anomalies that I found as I was doing my research, and in later episodes, we're going to get fully into this, but I just kind of want to. So you remember the lizard people catacomb episode that you and I did? Yeah, this is going to get kind of weird. Okay, so Lindsay and I decided we were going to do a breakdown episode on this, which is like the scripted episodes that we have on Metaphysical
Yeah,
YouTube
yeah.
right now. While I'm researching the Olmecs and the Maya, right? And she's researching this separately than I am, and I'm like stuck on the Olmecs, and I'm looking at this one structure that they found. These structures that they found that they're calling altars. Have you seen these Olmec altars?
No,
These
I have not.
Olmec altars, dude. These Olmec altars are like 3 meters high and twice as long.
Oh, so they're massive.
But like actually now they think that these might have been thrones. All I have to say to that is if that was a throne, these were giants, because who's going to sit on that thing, right? Altars maybe, but like that's with the understanding that the Olmecs may have been sacrificing. There has been no evidence that the Olmecs were sacrificing. They may have been doing some bloodletting or something like that, and that could be argued, right? These altars are huge, but look at these figures in the altars. Each one of these altars, there were 7 of these altars that were found, and each of them have figures emerging from what? From some kind of like cave system, right? So, okay.
Right.
Meanwhile, Lindsay's researching this lizard catacomb, which is strange, right? Because we see the serpents with Viracocha, with Quetzalcoatl, and all of that stuff, right? And now we found these lizard people catacomb where we're not sure if they were like what lizard people, like actual reptilians, or if they were just worshiping something that they viewed as a lizard or a serpent,
Right.
right? Warren Schufelt was talking to. This is the guy that found the lizard catacombs back in the day. He's giving them all of this extra information that Warren G. Schufelt is finding when he's going out there and excavating this stuff. He's asserting that he's found catacombs beneath LA. This is in the 1930s. This is in the LA Times in the 1930s. And there's lizard people or lizard or serpent type of iconography. Now you've got the Olmecs. Think about how far that is from LA. If the Olmecs emerged from the caves and we have evidence of lizard people catacombs underneath LA, dude, Mesoamerica just got way bigger. Way bigger. We're talking
Yeah.
about this being in the Americas, and there was an advanced culture that had to go underground for a while to survive the Younger Dryas, and then came up. And of course, when the Olmecs came up, my theory is that the reason why the cave iconography is so important for them isn't because they were doing psychedelics, which these like, I don't know, these like, I think these archaeologists are on psychedelics when I hear that, because I'm like, how do you know? Like, we don't know exactly if that's what it was. Yes, could it have been sona? Is that what you say, sonas or whatever? That like, heat the body up and stuff. And I do think that sauna, excuse me. There is like probably there could be some of that, and definitely like these were spiritual people, right? But isn't it much more likely that they emerged from a cave, and this emergence from that cave where they've been for a really long time was really important to them? They came up onto the surface and they started civilization, and they have to remember that time. And then we've got evidence now of this lizard catacomb beneath LA, which, by the way, is right beneath the LA Times office right
Yeah.
now, where there was a reportedly like treasure and all kinds of tablets and crazy stuff. I mean, this is just a bizarre story.
Look, I did this. There was a cataclysm that happened 12,000 years ago. That's known in geologic records. That's evidence across the planet that there was a great cataclysm. People went underground at that time. Darren Kuyu. We have the Etruscan underground pyramids that we did a
Yes.
show on as well. There is so much evidence of this cataclysm and people going underground across this whole planet. It's unfathomable to me that modern archaeology is not putting two and two together. The reason why, obviously, is because the hunter gatherers, Clovis man, never built this kind of stuff, right?
How could they have? They did not have the tools, bro.
Right. They did not have they didn't know how to dig holes in the ground, right? Something that civilization was not what people say it was. Bottom line, it just was not. We see this higher, like earth-based culture that was
Primitive
here.
looking, but like,
Right. Right.
but
What the
advanced.
heck is primitive looking mean though?
Well,
Like
right.
it
I
only
mean,
comes like I wear
I was gonna
clothes
say
made
they're
by
not wearing a metaphysical t-shirt,
right.
basically.
I live in this box. I got these light things around me. Hey, I'm way more advanced than these people that just lived outside. Oh man,
No, but that's our notion. Like
I know.
we've been told that, right?
I have a bone to pick with what people think is like higher civilization versus lesser civilization. I do because it's not what people think it is. If you just put two and two together, if you're just an open minded archaeologist, skeptical but open minded, you can start to correlate all these things and really get underneath it in a very fast way. But see, if you bring that back for peer review, you're just going to get destroyed. You're going to be put in the camp of Graham Hancock. You're going to lose your job, your tenure, whatever, and that's really how they put the noose around people who would normally research this stuff is tenure.
Yeah, Ancient Apocalypse is the most dangerous show on Netflix. Like even this, like I don't even want to know who the media is that did this, that reported this, but it's like writing headlines like that is not journalism. I'm sorry,
Right.
it's not. I have a bit of a journalism background, and that's not how you allow people to come to their own conclusions by writing something like that. Dangerous. A show with truly preposterous theory is one of the streaming giant's biggest hits, and it seems to exist solely for conspiracy theorists. Why has this been allowed?
Why has this been allowed?
Like
Who's
that,
telling
we're
us
getting we're getting dangerously into the totalitarian zone here. I don't want to like, it's just people's, I just, okay, look, you and I grew up at a different time, and in
Yeah.
the 80s, like, everyone was talking about the man, and we were reading George Orwell, and we were pretty concerned with not getting ourselves into a situation where we could go into jail for having a thought crime. And here we are. And just, I think maybe too, I know a little bit too much about how PR was actually formed back in the early 1900s and what it's done to media today and how media today is used. And I'm not criticizing any journalist or anything like that. That's not what I'm doing. It's more just like the system itself is broken right now because dishonest marketing and agendas can be mixed in with something that is not supposed to have that, which is just
Right.
fair journalism, third
Right.
party, nonpartisan journalism, which is something we should be striving for in our cultures. And this is why I believe we have a situation where Graham Hancock is getting attacked and called a racist for bringing some of these concepts up, which we should be able to talk about, when actually, I mean, that's preposterous. His wife's
Right.
black.
Right.
His wife's black.
Well,
Like,
you know,
the guy's not a racist,
right.
like,
I
you
know.
can not like his theory, but let's not assert through the headlines that we're crafting that he is
Personal
racist.
attacks. Right,
Yes, personal
right. Well,
attacks.
I mean, this was brought up by J. Allen Hynek, who ran Project Blue Book. So J. Allen Hynek in the 1950s, he was an astronomer, right? And he was
Yeah,
a university professor. He was brought into Project Sign, Project Grudge, and then Project Blue Book because he initially had stated that it was a UFO fad and it was silly and ridiculous. And these things aren't real because people are just misidentifying things. That's how he came into it. Then,
right.
as he went through it, he began to understand that, wait, something's going on here. And the Air Force and is trying to keep me from understanding the depths of it. And this is why throughout that whole process, he changed his mind on UFOs from what the Air Force wanted him to be stating. Because this is what was coming out of it. Personal attacks,
Yeah.
cultural provincialism was coming out of people, scientists who are holier than thou and would denigrate people who were doing research, like they were denigrating him, doing research on this particular subject. And they would do personal attacks. And he was stating that personal attacks and this type of denigration is not part of the scientific process. And I don't know why, basically, he didn't know why they were doing that. And so people were taught that in the scientific process, you are to attack others vehemently and to go after them personally, like they're doing to Graham Hancock, right?
Because it distracts from the actual facts and the data that they're presenting
That
on
is
it.
not
Because
part of the scientific process, yet they've
no,
included it now.
it's not a part of the journalistic process either. Actually, in the
Right.
past, that was like extreme taboo. You never did that. You allow people to come to their own conclusion. And this is why I think Graham Hancock has such a hard time dealing with scientists or archaeologists. It's like he didn't grow in that. He was a journalist looking for facts, trying to present the facts. Then he's like, I just presented the facts. Why am I getting attacked? Well, you're not actually in your lane anymore. Yeah, we need to change that. And I think that this is actually one of the reasons why John and I wanted to start this show is we need open conversations about this stuff. Even if it gets a little weird, so what? So like what? Our characters are going to get attacked for talking about strange things sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not a
Um,
university professor. Neither are you.
no, and I don't want to
We
be,
don't, we're not
honestly,
thinking.
because the indoctrination that it takes to become a university professor is exactly what I'm trying to avoid. I
Right.
mean, no offense if you're a university professor, but I think especially like those in some certain academic communities, definitely there is like a certain type of culture that is established there that you have to act
Right.
within. And if you
Well,
don't,
I
you're out.
know people. I know people in that system who are very into the weird stuff, but they can't make mention of it in any way. They can't bring their research out in any way if they have time to do it because they're going to get fired. They're going to get
Mm.
dragged through the mud and they're going to get fired. But yet they're still into this stuff, right? So, hey, it works. The system they've created works to keep that suppression going. And these people are too afraid because they're not going to be able to eat, not going to be able to feed their families, which is where the noose is.
Leave it up to you guys at home to decide what all of this means and whether or not it's right. We just bringing up the issues here. We're going to close this episode out. And in the next episode, we're going to keep going on this and actually get into a lot of anomalies. We're going to get into Pumapunku, the H structures. We are going to definitely touch on more of the Mesoamerican culture and Cydonia and Mars. And it's going to be super interesting. So I hope you guys liked this episode. John, thanks so much for being with us. And for everybody at home, we hope you thought this episode was out of this world.